Now I'd like to yield myself such time as I may consume for an opening statement. I'm going to try to speak a little just off the cuff here because this is something I've been thinking about for a while and something we've been discussing as a committee for now a few months. We're in a real mess financially. We did a fiscal state of the nation hearing, and I think we all agreed, even though we may not agree on exactly how to address it. We agreed that the financial health of our country is in decline and that the deficit spending and debt trajectory is absolutely and completely unsustainable, and we have to do something about it. I think the debt ceiling proposal that Republicans passed out of the House is a good first step. It's just a step, but it's an important step to getting our fiscal house in order. And it reflects the principles that will be reflected in our budget resolution. Rein in the spending, right-size the bureaucracy, and encourage growth. Get our economy off high center. Get out of this nosedive into recession and get us back on the path to prosperity once again. I've said this to my friend, Mr. Boyle. Republicans have contributed to this over time as well, and I don't think anybody, as a lawmaker or leader of this country, has any credibility if they don't understand that fact. But let me say this, we have never experienced in the history of our country the avalanche of spending like we have seen and witnessed in the last 2 years. $10 trillion of spending, 6 of which has been added to our national debt, all of which has contributed to record inflation, soaring interest rates, an economy that is sliding quickly into recession and getting us closer, and I don't think anybody knows exactly when. The problem is when you tip over the precipice into a sovereign debt crisis, all bets are off at that point. I mean, we're borrowing $1.5 trillion today as a government, and the gap in funding our government will be $3 trillion if we just keep the policies we have now in 10 years. So if you undermine the currency and our ability to borrow, it looks really bleak. And that's why we have to have a sense of urgency, Democrats and Republicans, to deal with this. And that's why I hope and pray that the President and our colleagues in the Senate and my Democrat friends will come to the table and let's raise the debt ceiling responsibly by allowing our nation to pay its bills, protect the good faith and credit of the United States, but at the same time address this out-of-control spending that has put hardworking American families in a real bind, like a real bind. Think about this. This statistic is startling to me. An average family of 4 is paying $13,000 per year more to purchase the same goods and services they did January 2021. $13,000, over $1,000 a month. 6 out of 10 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, y'all. 45%, I read this yesterday, Ms. Gressler, 45% of Americans say that if they had an emergency that cost more than $1,000, they can't survive it. We see savings down, we see credit card debt and consumer debt up at the highest levels. This is a crisis. This is a cost of living crisis. It's driven by inflation, and inflation's been driven by, in large part, spending. So I encourage my friends and colleagues on the other side of the aisle, work with us and encourage the President to do what 3 out of 4 Americans expect him to do and all of us to do. 3 out of 4 say the president ought to negotiate fiscal reforms in the debt ceiling. He's done it before. That's the thing, Ralph. He's done it before in 2011. The last major right-sizing of the bureaucracy and the reining in of the spending that was excessive was led by none other than Joe Biden as vice president. And he was proud to do it, as he should have been, and he did it as senator. So this isn't unprecedented. This isn't unusual. In fact, I would say it would be unusual and even irresponsible if we don't do something to pay our bills and rein in the spending at the same time, in a very sensible way, in a very straightforward way. And I believe that's what the Republicans have done in the House by passing the Limit, Save, Grow Act. And now I hope that our colleagues will respond responsibly and in kind. Here's the bottom line. Our federal government is 40% bigger today than it was in 2019 as we were going into unprecedented pandemic. So coming out of the pandemic, CBO projected we'd be spending in discretionary spending hundreds of billions of dollars less than we're spending today. President Obama's last budget had us spending less than we're spending now. His last budget projected that. Folks, there's bloat, there's excessive spending, there are programs and policies that need to be repealed. And if we do that, we've got a fighting chance to bring down inflation and to give our children a more hopeful future with respect to our nation's finances. Look, I could go through this list here because I've got a speech, Brendan, but I want to share something with everybody that is just as hot off the press here. CBO gave us a mid-fiscal year report. 7 months into the fiscal year, here's their report. We are borrowing at 236% higher rate than we did this time, over that time frame rather, last year. That's $400 billion more borrowing this year over the first 7 months than last year. The biggest driver of the spending, or drivers, one, 40% increase in interest payments. Chuck, our interest payments this year will be $500 billion. We'll triple that with just the current policies. In 10 years, we'll be spending $1.5 trillion in interest payments. Not a single soldier will benefit, not a single senior, not an anti-poverty program, not infrastructure. We get nothing for it. It's up 40%, guys, in the first 7 months of this year over last year. The other driver is 56% or $48 billion in increased spending at the Department of Education because President Biden did what I believe is unconstitutional, certainly an overreach and very reckless, to cancel almost $700 billion of student loans. Basically, having lower income families, many of whom just said, I can't go to college because I can't afford it, basically writing off the debt for upper and middle income folks and increasing inflation with respect to college tuition. So that's a driver. And then, of course, inflation's impacted Medicare's trust fund. It's impacted Social Security trust fund. Medicare now is up 15% as a result. That's $61 billion. Social Security spending up 11%. That's $73 billion. We're accelerating this insolvency problem for important senior safety nets. Guys, that came out just 2 days ago. I won't go through the army of IRS agents. I won't go through the excessive and expensive and unnecessary climate policies, hundreds of billions. I won't go through the expansion of health care to people who already had health care and make hundreds of $500,000 a year. Makes no sense. It's wasteful. It's unnecessary. And I certainly can highlight some of what I would refer to as progressive Democrat or woke earmarks. $3 million for the LGBTQ museum, $2 million to promote dirt bike culture in Baltimore, $1.2 million for Pride Centers in San Diego, $3.6 million for the Michelle Obama Trail in Decatur, Georgia. If the folks in New York want to build an LGBTQ museum, have at it. But the people in Lubbock, Texas ought not to underwrite it. Let's get back to our core function. We are washed in waste, folks. We are in a sustained inflation crisis, and we got to get this thing back on track, and we got to do it soon. So, I welcome our witnesses. Our mission is to restore fiscal sanity in this place and to get our house in order and to make sure that our country's future is not bleak as it is today, but bright because we're doing what every American's doing, tightening our belts, changing our spending habits, and paying our bills.